Christmas Day, 1642. While England tears itself apart in civil war, a tiny, premature infant gasps for breath in a cold stone manor house in Woolsthorpe, Lincolnshire. The midwives shake their heads. "This child," they whisper, "is so small he could fit inside a quart mug. He will not survive the night." But he does. The baby's father, also named Isaac Newton, lies cold in his grave, having died 3 months before his son drew his first breath. The widow Hannah cradles her impossibly fragile newborn, alone in a world of chaos and uncertainty. She has no way of knowing that this struggling infant will one day unlock the secrets of the universe itself. For 3 years, mother and son exist in their small world together. Then everything changes. Hannah meets Barnabas Smith, a wealthy rector from a neighboring parish. He is 63 years old. She is 30. He makes her an offer: marriage, financial security, a comfortable life. But there is a condition, one that will shatter a small boy's world forever. The child Isaac must stay behind. On the day his mother leaves, 3-year-old Isaac stands at the window of Woolsthorpe Manor, watching her walk away toward her new life. She does not look back. His grandmother Marjorie, now his reluctant guardian, pulls him from the window, but the damage is done. His mother has chosen another man, another life, another family over him. Just 1 mile away, close enough that young Isaac can see the church steeple from his window, his mother builds a new family with her elderly husband. She bears 3 more children, Mary, Benjamin, and Hannah. Half-siblings who receive the love and attention Isaac craves. Every Sunday, he might catch glimpses of them at church, this family that exists without him, this mother who abandoned him for a better offer. The psychological wound cuts deeper than any physical injury could. In the silence of Woolsthorpe Manor, something hardens inside the lonely boy. He learns that people leave. That love is conditional. That he cannot trust others with his heart. He turns inward. While other children play together in the village, Isaac builds elaborate models, sundials, water clocks, miniature windmills so precise they actually grind wheat into flour. His hands are always busy, his mind always racing. He doesn't need other children. He doesn't need anyone. When Isaac is 10 years old, Barnabas Smith dies. Hannah returns to Woolsthorpe Manor, bringing with her the 3 children from her second marriage. The mother who left now expects to resume her place. But the boy she abandoned has changed. The damage cannot be undone. At 11, Isaac is sent away to King's School in Grantham, 7 miles from home. He lodges with the Clark family, where Mr. Clark runs an apothecary. Surrounded by bottles of chemicals and mysterious substances, Isaac's brilliant mind finds new puzzles to solve. He excels academically, but socially, he remains an outsider, quiet, intense, strange. Then, in 1656, tragedy strikes again. Hannah's second husband, the man she chose over her firstborn son, is dead. And suddenly, she needs Isaac. She pulls him from school. The boy who showed such academic promise must now become a farmer. It's practical, she insists. The family needs him to manage the estate. But Isaac is utterly unsuited for farming. While he should be tending sheep, he's reading books under trees. While he should be watching the crops, he's lost in mathematical problems. Servants find the livestock wandering while Isaac sits absorbed in calculations, completely oblivious. He is a failure at the one thing his mother demands of him. But his schoolmaster, Henry Stokes, sees something in this peculiar young man that others miss. Along with Isaac's uncle William Ayscough, Stokes pleads with Hannah. This boy is different. Special. Sending him back to university isn't just an opportunity, it's a necessity. He will never be a farmer. He could be something far greater. Reluctantly, Hannah agrees. In June 1661, 18-year-old Isaac Newton arrives at Trinity College, Cambridge as a subsizar, the lowest rank of student, required to work as a servant to wealthier students to pay his way. The boy whose mother chose money over him now empties chamber pots and serves meals to his social betters. The humiliation burns, but it also fuels him. At Cambridge, Isaac discovers something extraordinary: ideas. Not the stale Aristotelian philosophy taught in formal lectures, but revolutionary new thinking, Descartes' mechanical philosophy, Galileo's observations, Kepler's laws. He devours them in private, teaching himself, pushing further than his instructors could imagine. In his rooms at Trinity, working by candlelight, Newton begins filling notebooks with questions that challenge everything. What is motion? What is light? What holds the planets in their courses? The abandoned child is becoming someone who will abandon the old ways of thinking entirely. But the emotional scars remain. At 19, Newton makes a list of his sins, a brutal self-examination that reveals the depth of his pain. Among the transgressions he catalogues, threatening my father and mother Smith to burn them and the house over them. The rage of the abandoned child, still burning years later. As Newton completes his bachelor's degree in 1665, plague begins spreading through England. Cambridge closes. Students and faculty flee. Isaac Newton returns to Woolsthorpe Manor, back to the place where his mother left him, back to the isolation that shaped him. He doesn't know it yet, but this forced solitude, this return to abandonment, will become the most productive period in the history of science. The wounds that made him unable to connect with others have also made him capable of something no one else can do, spending months, even years, alone with nothing but his thoughts. Pushing deeper into nature's secrets than any human being has ever gone. The plague is coming. The world is about to shut down. And in that shutdown, in that terrible isolation, Isaac Newton will discover the mathematical language of the universe itself. The abandoned child will finally find something that will never leave him, truth, expressed in the pure, unchanging beauty of mathematical law. The plague sweeps through England like God's judgment. Cities empty. Bodies pile in the streets. Cambridge University stands abandoned, its halls echoing with silence. And Isaac Newton, 23 years old, sits alone in his childhood bedroom at Woolsthorpe Manor, about to change the world. For most people, isolation is torture. For Newton, it is liberation. With no lectures to attend, no social obligations to navigate, no awkward interactions with other humans to endure, Newton's mind explodes with creativity. He works 18, 20 hours a day, barely eating, barely sleeping, lost in a fever of discovery that will later be called the Annus Mirabilis, the year of miracles. Except it isn't 1 year. It's 2. And the miracles just keep coming. He starts with mathematics. The problems that stumped the greatest minds of Europe, Newton solves them almost casually, inventing entirely new mathematical tools as he goes. He develops what he calls the method of flux ions, a way of calculating rates of change and areas under curves. We know it today as calculus, and it will become the mathematical language of physics, engineering, and economics for the next 3 centuries. But Newton doesn't publish. Doesn't tell anyone. Just fills notebook after notebook with revolutionary mathematics, then moves on to the next problem. In a darkened room, Newton takes a prism, a triangular piece of glass, and lets a beam of sunlight pass through it. The white light splits into a rainbow of colors. This much others have seen before. But Newton looks deeper. He takes a second prism and isolates just one color, say, red. Then he passes it through another prism. According to the prevailing theory, it should split again. It doesn't. The red stays red. Newton realizes something profound: white light isn't pure. It's a mixture. All the colors are already there, and the prism simply separates them. It's a simple observation that destroys centuries of optical theory. Light isn't what anyone thought it was. Then comes the question that will make him immortal: why does an apple fall? The story of the apple has been told and retold until it's become a cartoon. But something did happen in that orchard at Woolsthorpe. Newton, walking in the garden, watching fruit fall from trees, asked himself a question that seems obvious only after someone asks it: if gravity pulls the apple down, how far up does gravity reach? To the top of the tree? To the clouds? To the moon itself? What if, and this is the leap that changes everything, what if the same force pulling the apple to the ground is also pulling the moon toward the earth? What if the moon is constantly falling, but moving sideways fast enough that it keeps missing the earth, tracing an endless circle in the sky? What if the force that governs the heavens is the same force that governs the earth? In that moment, the ancient distinction between the celestial and terrestrial realms collapses. The universe becomes one place, governed by one set of laws. Newton begins calculating, and the mathematics work. The force weakens with distance according to an inverse square law. The planets' orbits make sense. Jupiter's moons make sense. Everything makes sense. He's 24 years old, and he's just unified heaven and earth. But again, he tells almost no one. He writes it down, checks his calculations, and files it away. The greatest scientific discovery in history sits in a drawer while Newton moves on to other problems. Why doesn't he publish? Perhaps because publication means exposure, criticism, conflict, all the things Newton's wounded psyche cannot handle. In isolation, his ideas are perfect, unassailable. Once released into the world, they become vulnerable, just like he was vulnerable when his mother walked away. When the plague finally subsides in 1667, Newton returns to Cambridge. He's made discoveries that would make 10 men famous. He's done the work of a lifetime. He's 25 years old. The world is about to discover what Isaac Newton can do. And Newton is about to discover that the world is full of people who will challenge him, criticize him, and try to claim his ideas as their own. The miracle years of isolation are over. The wars are about to begin. Newton returns to Cambridge carrying secrets that could reshape human understanding. But the solitary genius faces a new challenge, the one thing he's never learned to navigate: other people. In 1667, Trinity College elects him a fellow. In 1669, at just 26 years old, he becomes Lucasian Professor of Mathematics, one of the most prestigious positions in English academia. His mentor, Isaac Barrow, stepped aside specifically for Newton. The young man's genius is undeniable. Newton delivers lectures on optics to rooms that are often empty. Students don't understand him. Colleagues don't know what to make of him. He doesn't seem to care. He's not there for them. He's there for the work. In his rooms at Trinity, Newton builds a laboratory. But not for the experiments his colleagues might expect. He's pursuing alchemy, the ancient quest to transmute base metals into gold, to discover the philosopher's stone, to unlock the fundamental secrets of matter itself. Night after night, Newton tends his furnaces, carefully noting the color changes in his chemical reactions, recording everything in coded language. He's convinced that hidden within alchemical tradition are truths about the nature of matter that the new mechanical philosophy has missed. He spends thousands of hours, eventually thousands of pages, chasing this dream. Is it madness? Or is Newton, as always, looking deeper than others can see, trying to understand what matter actually is at its most fundamental level? History will struggle to answer this question. But while Newton hides his alchemy, his optical work cannot remain secret forever. In 1668, he builds a reflecting telescope, a radical new design using mirrors instead of lenses. It's small, just 6 inches long, but it works better than telescopes many times its size. When he demonstrates it to colleagues in 1671, they're astounded. The Royal Society of London, England's premier scientific institution, demands to see it. The telescope makes Newton famous. In 1672, he's elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. He's arrived. He's recognized. And he makes a catastrophic mistake: he decides to publish. Newton sends the Royal Society a paper describing his prism experiments and his theory that white light is composite. It's brilliant. It's revolutionary. And Robert Hooke, one of England's leading scientists, the Royal Society's curator of experiments, rips it apart. Hooke's criticism isn't entirely unfair. Newton's theory challenges Hooke's own work on light. But Hooke's tone is condescending, dismissive. He treats Newton like a clever amateur who doesn't understand the nuances of optical science. For Newton, it's devastating. He doesn't respond like a mature scientist engaging in scholarly debate. He responds like an abandoned child being rejected again. The criticism feels like betrayal, like attack, like his mother walking away. Newton fires back with barely contained rage. The exchange becomes bitter, personal. Other scientists join in with their own criticisms, Christian Huygens from Holland, Ignace Parties from France. They're not trying to destroy Newton. They're doing what scientists do, questioning, probing, testing ideas. But Newton cannot separate intellectual criticism from personal attack. Each challenge feels like a wound. By 1676, he's had enough. He withdraws from public scientific discourse entirely, writing to Henry Oldenburg, the Royal Society's secretary, "I see I have made myself a slave to philosophy, but if I get free of Mr. Hooke's business, I will resolutely bid adieu to it eternally, accepting what I do for my private satisfaction." He retreats into his private world of mathematics, alchemy, and increasingly, theology. Newton begins studying the Bible with the same obsessive intensity he applies to mathematics. He learns Hebrew. He dissects church history. He traces the corruption of Christian doctrine through the centuries. And he reaches a dangerous conclusion: the Trinity is a false doctrine, inserted into Christianity in the 4th century. This is heresy. If discovered, it could cost him his position, his reputation, everything. Newton is already isolated by temperament. Now he's isolated by belief, carrying a secret that makes him a stranger even among the educated elite who surround him. But in 1684, a visitor arrives who will drag Newton back into the public sphere, whether he wants it or not. Edmund Halley, a young astronomer, makes the journey to Cambridge with a question: what curve would a planet describe if gravity followed an inverse square law? Newton answers immediately: an ellipse. Halley is stunned. How does Newton know this? "I have calculated it," Newton says simply. He's known for nearly 20 years. He's had the answer since those plague years at Woolsthorpe. He just never told anyone. Halley realizes what he stumbled upon. He begs Newton to publish. The world needs this. Science needs this. Newton begins writing. 3 months become 6. 6 months become 18. What starts as a short paper grows into the most important scientific book ever written, Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, Mathematical Principles of Natural Philosophy. The Principia lays out the 3 laws of motion and the universal law of gravitation in rigorous mathematical form. It explains planetary orbits, the tides, the precession of the equinoxes, the motion of comets. It's not just a book of discoveries. It's a new way of doing science, mathematical, precise, predictive, universal. But even this triumph becomes poisoned by conflict. Robert Hooke, Newton's old nemesis, hears about the forthcoming book. He writes to Newton claiming credit for the inverse square law. He wants acknowledgement. Recognition. His name in Newton's masterwork. Newton explodes with rage. He threatens to suppress the entire 3rd book of the Principia, the part that applies his laws to the solar system. The greatest scientific work in history almost dies because Newton cannot bear to share credit with a man who criticized him 15 years earlier. Halley, with infinite patience and diplomatic skill, talks Newton down. He arranges for the Royal Society to publish the book. Except the Society has no money, so Halley pays for publication himself. He edits the manuscript, manages Newton's emotions, and shepherds this difficult genius through to publication. In July 1687, the Principia appears. It's difficult, mathematical, accessible to perhaps a few dozen people in all of Europe. But those who can read it recognize immediately what they're seeing. The universe has been decoded. The clockwork of creation has been revealed. Isaac Newton, the abandoned child from Lincolnshire, has discovered the mathematical laws that govern all motion, from falling apples to orbiting planets to the trajectory of comets slicing through the solar system. He's 44 years old. He's created a revolution. And the personal cost has been enormous. Newton has no close friends. He's never married, never courted, never shown romantic interest in anyone. He exists in his work, for his work. The relationships he does maintain are often with younger men who admire him, who pose no threat, who accept his authority without question. One such relationship develops with Nicolas Fatio de Duillier, a brilliant young Swiss mathematician. For a few years in the early 1690s, they're intensely close. They discuss mathematics, theology, alchemy. Newton seems happier than he's been in years. Then, mysteriously, the relationship ends. In 1693, Newton suffers some kind of breakdown. He writes strange, paranoid letters to friends, accusing them of plotting against him. He can't sleep. He can't eat. Something has shattered inside him. Was it the end of the friendship with Fatio? Mercury poisoning from his alchemical experiments? Simple exhaustion after years of intense work? We may never know. But when Newton emerges from this crisis, he's different. Harder. More remote. And he's ready to leave Cambridge behind forever. In 1696, Isaac Newton makes a decision that baffles his contemporaries. The greatest scientist in Europe accepts a government job as warden of the Royal Mint. Has the genius given up on science? Is this a waste of his extraordinary mind? His friends and admirers are horrified. But Newton sees it differently. Cambridge has become a cage. The Lucasian professorship, once an honor, now feels like an obligation. The university's religious requirements force him to hide his heretical beliefs. He's tired of pretending. Tired of isolation in the fens. At 53, he wants money, influence, and escape. London offers all three. The timing is critical. England's economy is in crisis. The silver currency has been clipped and worn so badly that coins are worth far less than their face value. Counterfeiters flood the market with fake money. The government has ordered a complete recoinage. Every coin in England must be recalled and replaced. It's a massive undertaking, and it's going disastrously. Enter Newton, appointed through the influence of his friend Charles Montague, Chancellor of the Exchequer. The position of warden is supposed to be a sinecure, a comfortable position requiring little actual work. But Newton has never done anything halfway in his life. He arrives at the Tower of London, where the Mint operates, and transforms into something nobody expected, a brilliant, ruthless administrator. Newton drives the recoinage project with the same obsessive intensity he once applied to calculus. He expands operations, improves efficiency, and pushes the workers to unprecedented productivity. Within 2 years, the crisis is resolved. Millions of new coins circulate through England. The economy stabilizes. But Newton isn't finished. He decides to destroy the counterfeiters. This isn't abstract mathematical work. This is detective work, gritty, dangerous, personal. Newton disguises himself and visits taverns, gathering intelligence. He infiltrates criminal networks. He interrogates suspects personally, extracting confessions. He sends men to the gallows. The most famous case involves William Chaloner, a counterfeiter who made the mistake of publicly challenging Newton's competence. Chaloner is smart, charismatic, and politically connected. He's beaten charges before. He doesn't realize who he's dealing with. Newton methodically builds a case against Chaloner, tracking down witnesses, gathering evidence, closing every loophole. When Chaloner tries to bribe his way out, Newton blocks him. When Chaloner appeals to influential friends, Newton outmaneuvers them. In 1699, Chaloner is convicted and hanged at Tyburn. Newton shows no mercy. No remorse. The man who discovered the laws of planetary motion has discovered something else: he enjoys wielding power. In 1700, Newton is promoted to Master of the Mint, a position he'll hold for the rest of his life. It comes with a substantial salary, far more than he ever earned at Cambridge. For the first time in his life, Newton is wealthy. He moves into a house on St. Martin's Street in London. He lives comfortably, even lavishly by his previous standards. His half-niece, Catherine Barton, becomes his hostess and companion. She's beautiful, witty, charming, everything Newton is not. She navigates London society with ease, while Newton remains awkward and remote at social gatherings. Rumors swirl about Catherine's relationship with Charles Montague, now Earl of Halifax. Some whisper she's his mistress. When Halifax dies, he leaves her a substantial fortune. Newton seems unconcerned by the gossip. Catherine is family. She's loyal. That's all that matters. In 1703, Robert Hooke dies. Within weeks, Newton is elected president of the Royal Society. It's not a coincidence. Newton has waited decades for this moment. As long as Hooke lived, Newton refused the presidency. Now, with his old enemy gone, Newton seizes control of England's premier scientific institution. His presidency is authoritarian. He dominates meetings, controls what research is presented, and effectively determines the direction of English science. He's not interested in collaboration or democratic debate. The Royal Society becomes Newton's instrument. In 1704, he finally publishes Optics, the book describing his work on light that he's sat on for 30 years. With Hooke dead, it's safe to release. The book is more accessible than the Principia, written in English rather than Latin, filled with experimental details and provocative queries about the nature of light, matter, and force. It secures Newton's reputation in optics just as firmly as the Principia secured his reputation in mechanics. But even as Newton enjoys his new power and prestige, a storm is building across the English Channel. A German mathematician named Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz has published his own version of calculus. And some people are suggesting that maybe, just maybe, Leibniz invented it first. Newton's rage, dormant for years, awakens with terrifying force. The calculus. The mathematical language of change itself. The tool that unlocks problems in physics, astronomy, engineering, economics. One of humanity's greatest intellectual achievements. And two men claim to have invented it, Isaac Newton and Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. The truth is complicated. Both men developed calculus independently. Newton did it first, in the 1660s, but didn't publish. Leibniz developed his version in the 1670s and published in 1684. Newton's method is powerful but clunky. Leibniz's notation is elegant and easier to use. It's the notation we still use today. This could have been a story of parallel discovery, of two great minds reaching the same destination by different paths. But Isaac Newton cannot accept sharing credit for anything. Especially not with someone he considers a thief. The dispute simmers through the 1690s. Then, in 1711, Leibniz's supporter John Keill publishes a paper openly accusing Leibniz of plagiarism. Leibniz appeals to the Royal Society for justice. Fatal mistake. The Royal Society is controlled by Newton. Newton appoints a committee to investigate. He secretly writes most of their report himself. The conclusion, unsurprisingly, is that Newton invented calculus first and Leibniz stole it. It's a kangaroo court, and everyone on the continent knows it. But Newton doesn't care. He publishes the report, distributes it widely, and continues attacking Leibniz in anonymous reviews that everyone knows Newton wrote. Leibniz fights back, but he's outmatched. Newton controls the Royal Society, has the weight of English scientific establishment behind him, and possesses an inexhaustible capacity for vindictive warfare. The dispute becomes personal, ugly, nationalist, English mathematics versus continental mathematics. The cost is enormous. British mathematicians, following Newton's difficult notation and methods, fall behind their continental colleagues for generations. The free exchange of ideas across Europe breaks down. Science itself is damaged. But Newton cannot stop. Even after Leibniz dies in 1716, Newton continues attacking his dead rival's reputation, publishing more anti-Leibniz material, ensuring that history records his priority. Why? What drives this obsessive need for sole credit? Perhaps it goes back to Woolsthorpe Manor, to a 3-year-old boy watching his mother choose someone else. Perhaps Newton learned early that love is scarce, that there isn't enough to go around, that if someone else gets it, you lose. He approaches intellectual credit the same way. There isn't enough glory for two. If Leibniz is acknowledged, Newton is diminished. It's the logic of abandonment, played out on the stage of European intellectual life. While waging war over calculus, Newton simultaneously prepares new editions of his masterwork. The second edition of the Principia appears in 1713, edited by Roger Coates. The third edition, edited by Henry Pemberton, comes out in 1726. Each edition refines, expands, responds to critiques, and strengthens the mathematical foundations. The Principia becomes more than a book. It becomes scripture for a new age, the age of reason, of mathematical certainty, of a clockwork universe running according to precise, knowable laws. But Newton himself remains elusive, contradictory, unknowable. In public, he's the great natural philosopher, the rational scientist, the man who banished mystery from the heavens. In private, he's still pursuing alchemy, still writing about biblical prophecy, still trying to decode the exact dimensions of Solomon's temple. He believes science and religion are one pursuit. The book of nature and the book of scripture are both written by God. Understanding the physical universe brings us closer to understanding the divine plan. Newton sees no contradiction between his physics and his faith. What Newton cannot reveal is that his faith is heretical. He's convinced the early church corrupted Christianity, that the Trinity is a later invention, that true Christianity was Arian, believing Jesus was created by God, not co-eternal with him. These beliefs are deadly dangerous. But Newton continues his theological research with the same intensity he brought to mathematics, producing thousands of pages of biblical analysis that he knows can never be published in his lifetime. He's fractured into multiple selves: Newton the public scientist, Newton the secret heretic, Newton the alchemist, Newton the powerful administrator. Each self is brilliant. Each is obsessive. None can be fully integrated with the others. In 1705, Queen and knights Newton at Cambridge. He's the first scientist so honored, Sir Isaac Newton. It's a recognition not just of scientific achievement but of his service at the mint and his status as a national treasure. The abandoned child from Woolsthorpe has become one of the most celebrated men in England. But celebration requires public appearances, social interaction, things Newton still finds agonizing. At dinners and receptions, he's stiff, formal, awkward. He has admirers, disciples, hangers-on. But friends? Real friends who know him, understand him, accept him? Those he's never had. As Newton enters his 70s, younger scientists begin building on his work. They see further because they stand, as Newton will later write, on the shoulders of giants. The Newtonian worldview spreads across Europe, popularized by brilliant expositors like Voltaire. But Newton himself remains isolated at the center of his fame, protected by his authority, imprisoned by his inability to truly connect with anyone. The genius who unified heaven and earth could never unify the fractured pieces of his own soul. By 1720, Isaac Newton is 77 years old. He's outlived most of his enemies, accumulated substantial wealth, and achieved a level of fame granted to few mortals. He's more than a scientist now. He's a legend, a symbol, the embodiment of human reason's triumph over ignorance. Yet he cannot rest. He continues attending Royal Society meetings, still dominating discussions even as his physical strength wanes. He revises the Principia one final time, working with Henry Pemberton to prepare the third edition. Every equation must be perfect. Every argument must be airtight. Even in his 8th decade, Newton demands perfection. His mind remains sharp, but his body begins to fail. Kidney stones torture him. Bladder problems make daily life a misery. He endures the pain with the same stoic determination he's shown his entire life. Complaint is weakness. Weakness is unacceptable. In his elegant London home, surrounded by his books and papers, Newton seems to have everything. But what does he actually have? Money, yes. He's amassed a considerable fortune through his mint salary and careful investments. When he dies, he'll leave an estate worth £30,000, a staggering sum. His relatives will be well provided for. Fame, certainly. All of Europe knows his name. Intellectuals make pilgrimages to meet him. His theories are taught at universities. The Newtonian worldview shapes how educated people understand reality itself. Power, absolutely. As president of the Royal Society, he controls the direction of English science. His word is law. His approval can make careers. His disapproval can destroy them. But love? Understanding? Genuine human connection? These have always eluded him. Catherine Barton, his niece and companion, manages his household with efficiency and grace. She's devoted to him, protective of him. But even she cannot penetrate the walls Newton has built around his inner self. No one can. In his final years, Newton turns increasingly to his religious and historical writings. He's been working for decades on The Chronology of Ancient Kingdoms Amended, attempting to use astronomical data and biblical texts to establish the true dates of ancient history. It's ambitious, brilliant in places, cranky-ish in others, vintage Newton, applying rigorous mathematical thinking to questions that don't quite fit mathematical methods. He also continues writing about prophecy and the corruption of Christianity. These manuscripts pile up in his rooms, thousands upon thousands of pages that can never be published. They're his true confession, his real beliefs, the parts of himself he's hidden from the world for 60 years. Newton knows these papers are dangerous. If published, they could destroy his reputation, tarnish his legacy. Yet he cannot stop writing them. The compulsion to understand, to decode, to discover hidden truth drives him until the very end. In early 1727, Newton's health deteriorates rapidly. The pain from his kidney stones becomes unbearable. He can barely sleep. Eating is agony. Yet he refuses to stop working. There are still problems to solve, still errors to correct, still priority disputes to win. On March 20, 1727, Isaac Newton dies at his home in Kensington, surrounded by relatives. He's 84 years old. He never married. Never had children. Never experienced romantic love. Never truly let another human being see all of him. What passes through his mind in those final moments? Does he think of his mother, Hannah, who walked away when he was 3? Does he think of the plague years at Woolsthorpe, when he unlocked the universe's secrets in perfect solitude? Does he think of all the enemies he vanquished, all the battles he won, all the truths he discovered? Or does he simply feel tired? The funeral is unprecedented for a scientist. Newton's body lies in state in Westminster Abbey, the same honor given to royalty and military heroes. The pall-bearers include 2 dukes, 3 earls, and the Lord Chancellor. It's a state funeral in all but name. They bury him in Westminster Abbey, near kings and queens. The monument erected later shows Newton reclining elegantly while angels display his greatest discoveries. The inscription reads, "Let mortals rejoice that there has existed such and so great an ornament of the human race." But what they bury is incomplete. The real Newton, the heretic, the alchemist, the wounded child who never recovered from abandonment, remains hidden in trunks full of unpublished manuscripts. For nearly 2 centuries, Newton's papers stay with his family. When they're finally examined in the 19th and 20th centuries, scholars are shocked. This isn't the Newton they thought they knew, the rational man of science, the prophet of the Enlightenment. This Newton was obsessed with alchemy, convinced he could find ancient wisdom hidden in chemical reactions. This Newton believed the universe had secret codes that could reveal the future. This Newton thought the church had corrupted Christianity and spent decades trying to recover its original truth. The economist John Maynard Keynes, after studying Newton's manuscripts, will write, "Newton was not the first of the age of reason. He was the last of the magicians." Both statements are true. Newton stands at the hinge of history, one foot in the medieval world of alchemy and biblical prophecy, the other foot in the modern world of mathematical physics and empirical science. He's transitional, contradictory, impossible to fit into simple categories. His legacy is equally complex. On one hand, Newton gave humanity the tools to understand and predict the physical world with unprecedented precision. The Industrial Revolution, space travel, modern technology, all rest on Newtonian foundations. His laws of motion and gravitation remained the bedrock of physics for 200 years, until Einstein showed they were approximations of something deeper. But Einstein himself said he stood on Newton's shoulders. Relativity doesn't destroy Newtonian physics, it encompasses it, showing the limits of its application. For the vast majority of human experience, from throwing a ball to launching a satellite, Newton's laws work perfectly. On the other hand, Newton's personal legacy is darker. His inability to share credit delayed British mathematics for generations. His authoritarian control of the Royal Society stifled scientific debate. His vindictiveness toward rivals created a culture of fear rather than collaboration. And yet, could Newton have been different? Could the man who unified heaven and earth have been anything other than driven, obsessive, isolated, unable to compromise? Perhaps genius of this magnitude requires damage. Perhaps you cannot see as deeply into nature's secrets as Newton did without losing something essential in your humanity. Perhaps the price of revolutionizing human knowledge is the inability to maintain ordinary human relationships. Or perhaps that's just what we tell ourselves to make sense of a man who was brilliant and broken, triumphant and tragic, who discovered the mathematical laws governing the universe but could never decode the laws governing the human heart. Nearly 200 years after his death, the world knows Isaac Newton as the embodiment of scientific rationality, the man who banished superstition and mystery. Who proved that nature operates according to mathematical laws we can discover and understand. Then, in 1936, Sotheby's auction house in London offers Newton's private papers for sale. The Portsmouth family, Newton's descendants, have finally decided to release the massive archive of unpublished manuscripts that Newton left behind. The University of Cambridge buys the scientific papers. But much of the collection, the alchemy, the theology, the biblical prophecy, seems so embarrassing, so contrary to Newton's image, that the university doesn't want it. These papers are sold off to various buyers, including economist John Maynard Keynes. What these buyers discover shocks them. The manuscript pages reveal that Newton spent more time on alchemy than on physics. Not just years, but decades. Over 1 million words on alchemical experiments, theories about the transformation of matter, speculation about ancient wisdom encoded in alchemical texts. Newton believed that the ancient philosophers, figures like Pythagoras and Moses, possessed profound knowledge about the nature of matter that had been lost or deliberately hidden. He saw alchemy not as primitive chemistry but as a path to understanding the fundamental structure of reality. Was he deluded? Perhaps. But perhaps he was also groping toward questions about matter and energy that wouldn't be properly answered until quantum mechanics in the 20th century. Newton intuited that there was more to matter than the mechanical philosophy could explain. He was right, even if his methods for discovering it were wrong. The theological manuscripts are even more explosive. Here is Newton, respected pillar of English society, knight of the realm, president of the Royal Society, denying the Trinity, attacking the corruption of the 4th century church. Arguing that Christianity had been hijacked by power-hungry bishops who invented false doctrines. If these views had been known during his lifetime, Newton would have been ruined. In 17th and 18th century England, Arianism, the belief that Jesus was created by God rather than co-eternal with him, was heresy, punishable by loss of position and social destruction. Newton kept his secret perfectly. He attended Anglican services when required. He said the right things in public. And in private, he filled thousands of pages with arguments against everything official Christianity taught. The chronological works reveal Newton trying to synchronize ancient history with biblical accounts, using astronomical data to date historical events. He's convinced that conventional chronology is wrong, that ancient kingdoms rose and fell earlier than historians believe. Some of his reasoning is brilliant, using descriptions of constellations in ancient texts to determine when they were written. Some is bizarre, arguing that all pagan gods are corrupted memories of biblical figures. This is Newton the pattern seeker, convinced that hidden codes and correspondences connect different realms of knowledge. The same mind that found mathematical patterns in planetary motions is seeking historical patterns, theological patterns, alchemical patterns. He cannot stop looking for the underlying order, the hidden truth, the secret key that will unlock all mysteries. Scholars struggle to reconcile these different Newtons. Was the alchemy a distraction from his real scientific work? Or was it part of the same quest, understanding the fundamental nature of reality? Was the theology a regrettable lapse into irrationality? Or was it the foundation of his worldview, the belief that nature and scripture are both divine revelations that must ultimately agree? Modern scholars increasingly see Newton as a unified figure whose science, alchemy, and theology all serve the same purpose, uncovering God's truth, whether written in the book of nature or the book of scripture. This makes Newton simultaneously more alien and more human. More alien because his worldview is so different from modern scientific materialism. He genuinely believed he was reading God's mind through mathematics. More human because his quest for truth wasn't coldly rational, it was passionate, even desperate, a search for meaning in a universe that had taken his mother away and taught him that love is scarce and trust is dangerous. The psychological studies of Newton begin in earnest. What made him this way? Was it the abandonment by his mother? The social isolation of his childhood? Some innate neurological difference? Modern psychologists have speculated that Newton might have been on the autism spectrum, his difficulty with social interaction, his obsessive focus on particular interests, his need for routine and control, his resistance to criticism. It fits, though we can never diagnose someone dead for 3 centuries. What seems clear is that Newton's emotional wounds and his intellectual genius were intertwined. The same inability to trust others that isolated him personally allowed him to spend years alone with difficult problems. The same obsessive need for control that made him a tyrant at the Royal Society also made him relentless in pursuing scientific questions until they yielded answers. You cannot separate the Newton who discovered universal gravitation from the Newton who destroyed William Chaloner or waged decades-long war against Leibniz. They're the same person, driven by the same needs, the same fears, the same compulsions. The hidden Newton is the real Newton, not despite the contradictions but because of them. He contains multitudes, none of which quite fit together: scientist and magician, rational mathematician and biblical prophet decoder, public figure and secret heretic, genius and damaged child. And perhaps that's the most important lesson. Genius doesn't emerge from perfection. It emerges from the complex, contradictory reality of human beings who are brilliant and flawed, visionary and blind, capable of both incredible insight and terrible cruelty. Newton saw further than anyone before him. But he was still human, still wounded, still limited. His triumph is that he didn't let those limitations stop him from revolutionizing our understanding of the universe. His tragedy is that he could decode the heavens but never decode himself. 300 years after his death, Isaac Newton's presence still shapes our world in ways both obvious and invisible. Every bridge that stands relies on Newtonian mechanics. Every airplane that flies applies his laws of motion. Every satellite orbiting Earth moves according to the gravitational principles he discovered. The smartphone in your pocket, the GPS guiding your car, the spacecraft exploring distant planets, all are Newtonian technology, descendants of equations written by candlelight in a Cambridge college room. But Newton's legacy goes deeper than engineering applications. He fundamentally changed how humans understand their place in the universe. Before Newton, the heavens were mysterious, governed by different laws than Earth, perhaps by divine whim or astrological forces. After Newton, the universe became comprehensible, one place, operating according to mathematical principles that human minds could grasp. This was psychologically revolutionary. It meant humanity wasn't helpless before cosmic forces. We could understand. We could predict. We could, eventually, control. The Enlightenment that swept Europe in the 18th century drew enormous inspiration from Newton. If the universe operated according to rational, discoverable laws, perhaps society could too. Perhaps reason could replace tradition, superstition, and arbitrary authority. Voltaire, who popularized Newton's ideas in France, saw Newtonianism as a weapon against religious dogmatism and political tyranny. The American founding fathers, designing a new government, thought in Newtonian terms: checks and balances, mechanical systems of power that would operate predictably. Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night, wrote Alexander Pope. God said, "Let Newton be." And all was light. It's beautiful poetry. It's also deeply ironic, given what we now know about Newton himself, that he spent as much time on alchemy as physics, that he believed in biblical prophecy, that he thought ancient wisdom was encoded in mythology and scripture. The Enlightenment created a mythological Newton, pure reason incarnate, the scientist as secular saint. The real Newton was stranger, darker, more medieval than they wanted to believe. Yet even the mythological Newton served an important function. He became a symbol of what human intelligence could achieve. He proved that individual genius could unlock nature's secrets. He showed that observation, mathematics, and rigorous thinking could reveal truths that had been hidden since the beginning of time. For every scientist who came after him, Newton set the standard. Not just in his discoveries, but in his approach: be mathematically rigorous, ground theories in observation, make testable predictions, don't accept authority, not even Newton's own authority, without questioning. If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants, Newton wrote in a letter to Robert Hooke. It's one of his most famous quotes, often interpreted as a statement of humility. But knowing Newton, it might have been a subtle insult. Hooke was a short man, possibly hunchbacked. Was Newton suggesting that Hooke was one of the giants he stood upon? Or was he implying that even with the help of giants, Hooke still couldn't see as far as Newton could? We'll never know. That's Newton. Even his moments of apparent graciousness might conceal barbs. Yet the image endures, progress is cumulative. Each generation of scientists stands on the shoulders of those who came before. Newton himself stood on Galileo, Kepler, Descartes, and many others. Einstein stood on Newton. Today's physicists stand on Einstein. The mathematics Newton invented, calculus, became the language of science and engineering. It's taught to millions of students every year, most of whom have no idea they're learning a tool created by a lonely genius in the 1660s. The Principia's 3 laws of motion remain the foundation of classical mechanics. 1. An object remains at rest or in uniform motion unless acted upon by a force. 2. Force equals mass times acceleration, F equals ma. 3. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Simple statements, but they contain the seeds of modern physics, engineering, and spaceflight. When Einstein developed relativity in the early 20th century, it didn't destroy Newtonian physics, it refined it, showing that Newton's laws are extremely accurate approximations for the speeds and scales humans normally experience. Only at near-light speeds or in extreme gravitational fields do Einstein's corrections become necessary. Similarly, quantum mechanics didn't invalidate Newton. It showed that at atomic scales, different rules apply. But for everything from baseballs to galaxies, Newton's mathematics work beautifully. This is part of Newton's genius. He chose the right level of description. He didn't try to explain what gravity is, that would wait for Einstein. He simply described how it behaves, and that description is so accurate it's still used to land rovers on Mars. But perhaps Newton's deepest legacy is methodological, the idea that nature can be described in mathematical language, that precise prediction is possible, that the universe is comprehensible. Before Newton, natural philosophy mixed observation with speculation, mechanical explanation with occult forces. After Newton, there was a clear path: find the mathematical laws, test them against observation, use them to make predictions. This methodology spread from physics to chemistry, biology, economics, psychology. Every field that wanted to be taken seriously tried to become mathematical, tried to find its own laws of nature. Not all succeeded. Human behavior is messier than planetary motion. But the aspiration, to move from description to mathematical prediction, traces back to Newton's example. The man himself, though. History has struggled with him. The Victorian era worshipped Newton as a pure hero of reason. The 20th century, discovering his alchemy and theology, didn't quite know what to make of him. The 21st century sees him as a more complex figure, undeniably brilliant but also vindictive, obsessive, emotionally damaged, operating with one foot in medieval mysticism and the other in modern science. What would Newton think of his legacy? Would he be pleased that his Principia is still read, that his laws are still taught, that his name is synonymous with genius? Perhaps. But he might be disappointed that his theological works remain largely ignored, that his chronologies are dismissed, that his alchemy is seen as an embarrassing distraction rather than a serious quest for truth. Newton believed he was uncovering God's plan, in the motions of planets, in the properties of light, in the hidden meanings of biblical prophecy. He saw it all as one unified pursuit. History has split him apart, celebrating the scientist while dismissing the theologian and alchemist. But maybe we can't have one without the others. Maybe the same mind that could focus on abstruse mathematical problems for months at a time was the same mind that could spend years decoding biblical prophecies. Maybe the obsessive personality that made Newton impossible to work with was exactly what allowed him to achieve what he achieved. The abandoned child of Woolsthorpe changed the world because his wounds drove him to seek certainty in a universe of uncertainty, patterns in apparent chaos, eternal laws in a world where people leave and love is conditional. He found those laws. He showed humanity that the universe operates according to principles we can understand. He unified heaven and earth, reducing the cosmos to mathematics, transforming terror of the unknown into the thrill of discovery. And he did it all alone, because he'd learned early that alone was the only way he could be. Was it worth it? The loneliness, the feuds, the inability to love or be loved, the years of pain and paranoia? Newton would probably say yes. The work mattered more than personal happiness. Truth mattered more than connection. Understanding the mind of God, even if it meant never understanding another human heart, was worth any price. We, the inheritors of his legacy, benefit from his choice. We live in a world transformed by Newtonian physics, by the scientific method he helped establish, by the confidence that nature can be understood. But we can also mourn what was lost, the human connection he never had, the love he never felt, the wholeness that eluded him despite all his genius. Isaac Newton, the abandoned child who became the man who explained the cosmos. The wounded soul who discovered eternal laws. The loneliest genius who ever lived, whose work connects us all to the fundamental structure of reality. His story is triumph and tragedy intertwined, brilliance and brokenness inseparable, a reminder that greatness often comes at a terrible cost, and that even those who unlock the secrets of the universe remain, in the end, achingly human. The apple falls according to mathematical law. But the man who discovered that law fell according to laws we still struggle to understand, the laws of trauma, isolation, genius, and the human need for love that, once denied, can never quite be filled. no matter how many truths about the universe you discover. Isaac Newton saw further than any human before him. But he could never see his way back to the 3-year-old boy standing at the window, watching his mother walk away, wondering why he wasn't enough. That boy spent the rest of his life proving he was enough, to himself, to history, to posterity. And he succeeded beyond any reasonable measure. But the wound remained, hidden beneath the equations, concealed behind the achievements, carried silently through 84 years of relentless work and lonely triumph. The man who unified the cosmos could never unify himself. And yet, the cosmos stays unified, the laws hold true, the mathematics work, the planets orbit exactly as Newton said they would. His pain became our enlightenment. His isolation became humanity's connection to the fundamental order of nature. His brokenness, somehow, revealed the unbroken laws that govern everything that moves, from atoms to galaxies, from his time to ours to the distant future when humans might walk on planets whose motions Newton predicted 3 centuries ago. This is the paradox of Isaac Newton, the most rational work ever done by a deeply irrational need, the most universal truths discovered by the most isolated human being. The greatest gift to humanity given by someone who could barely tolerate humanity's presence. We owe him everything. And he would probably still feel it wasn't enough. You've just experienced the extraordinary life of Isaac Newton, a story of genius born from pain, of triumph shadowed by tragedy, of a man who decoded the universe but could never decode his own heart. His story reminds us that greatness is complex, that brilliance and brokenness often coexist, and that the people who change the world are rarely the heroes we imagine them to be. If this journey through Newton's life moved you, challenged you, or changed how you see genius and human nature, please like this video to help others discover Newton's incredible story. Subscribe to this channel for more deep dives into the lives of history's most fascinating figures. Share this with someone who loves science, history, or stories about the complexity of human achievement. Comment below, what struck you most about Newton's life? Did his story change how you think about genius, isolation, or the cost of greatness? Coming next, we'll explore the lives of other historical figures whose personal struggles shaped their world-changing achievements. From Darwin's secret agonies to Einstein's hidden turmoil, the truth behind genius is always more human than we expect. Don't miss it. Subscribe now. And remember, the next time you see an apple fall, think of the lonely boy who asked why, and changed everything.